Members, a quorum is present. We ask our guests and visitors in the rear of the chamber and in the gallery to please stand for the prayer. We ask Member Ted Lieu to come forward for today's prayer. Mr. Lieu.
Is the prayer here? There we go. All right. Dear Almighty, for this new day with its promise of potential, we thank you. May our part in this day be full of meaning and hope for others. May our efforts and our words be characterized by kindness and give expression to the goodwill and truth that is within us. May they also be the key which unlocks the good and truth in others. Amen.
Thank you. Please remain standing for the flag salute led by Member Tran. Thank you. You may be seated. We'll have the reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Thursday, May 6, 2010. The Assembly met at 9 a.m. Honorable Fiona Moss, Speaker Pro Tem of the Assembly, presiding. Chief Clerk E. Dawson Wilson at the desk. Assistant Clerk
Mr. Garrick moves. Ms. Evans seconds that the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentations of petitions, there are none. Introduction of reference of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the Governor, there are none. Messages from the Senate, there are none. Motions and resolutions. I request unanimous consent for Assembly Members Block and Furutani to have guests and photographers on the floor. We'll also request unanimous consent to allow Mr. Swanson to adjourn in memory, present an adjournment in memory today. We'll also request unanimous consent to refer file item 100 ACA 21 Calderon to Rules Committee pursuant to Assembly Rule 97. Okay, we'll pass temporarily on that item. Okay. Also request unanimous consent to waive the file notice requirements to allow Appropriations Committee to hear AB 1602 by Mr. Bettis on Wednesday, May 12th at 9 a.m. in room 4202. We'll also request unanimous consent to order file item 132, AB 2721, Mr. Blakesley, from third reading to the first day consent calendar. Also request unanimous consent to allow Assembly Member Fong to take up file item 154, ACR 157, API Heritage Month resolution out of file order. At the request of the author, remove file item 91, SB 408, Padilla, from the consent calendar. And we'll do second reading. Clerk will note. We'll have the second reading. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1667, 2347, 1837, 2460, 2782 with amendments, 2787 with amendments, 1714, 1792, 1798, 1855, 1856, 1908, 1954. 1992, 2023, 2051, 2083, 2179, 2195, 2260, 2344, 2305, 2336, 2372, 2382, 2430, 2471, 2494, 2524, 2537, 2598, 2702, 2738, 2742, 1674, 1712, 1724, 1741, 1751, 1821, 1858, 1862, 2021, 2042, 2052, 2167, 2186, 2201, 2207, 2218, 2245, 2367, 2371, 2375, 2523, 2540, 2545, 2560, 2627, 2635, 2664, 2761, 2768, 2781. 2181 with amendments, 2443 with amendments, 2077 with amendments, 1962, 1965, 1666, 2184, 2304, 2508, 2509, 2613, 2426, 1857, 2790, 2091, 2794. Assembly Concurrent Resolution 140. Assembly Bill 2241 with amendments, 1716, 1742, 1881, 2772, 2774, 2771, 2797 with amendments. Senate Concurrent Resolution 74 with amendments and Senate Bill 408.
All bills deemed read and amendments adopted. At the request of the author, we would like to remove file item 91, SB 408 by Padilla from the consent calendar. Clerk will note. We're going to move to guest introductions. Mr. Block, are you ready with your guests? Mr. Block.
Madam Speaker, I have with me today a young woman who is a student at La Presa Elementary School, and she has been selected of all students in unincorporated San Diego County as the Outstanding Student Safety Officer. She has been given the title of Colonel. It is a prestigious title that is given each year to the Outstanding Student Safety Patrol Officer. She is here with her mother, with her teacher, and with two members of the California Highway Patrol. The student is Sabrina Rosas, so please join me in congratulating Sabrina as I present her with this resolution.
Mr. Berryhill would also like to recognize some students from his district. Mr. Berryhill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, today it's an honor to introduce Scott Borba, principal of Chrysler Elementary School, and I'm very proud to present its 2009-2010 Student Council officers and class representatives. Give a little wave, you guys. Chrysler Student Council represents more than 600 students and has worked diligently to fundraise for school activities and is extremely proud to say that they raised a whole bunch of money for the Haiti earthquake relief. So congratulations and welcome to Sacramento, you guys.
Members, without objection, we will now move to the resolution relative to API Heritage, file item 154, ACR 157. Fong by Mr. Fong. Clerk will read.
Assembly concurrent Resolution 157 by Assemblymember Fong relative to Asian and Pacific Islander American Heritage Month.
Mr. Fong, you may open on the measure.
Madam Speaker, members, I'm pleased and honored to present ACR 157 on behalf of the Asian Pacific Islander Joint Legislative Caucus to recognize May 2010 as Asian and Pacific Islander American Heritage Month. The resolution also commends California's Asian and Pacific Islanders for their notable accomplishments and outstanding service to our state. Originally, we celebrated Asian Pacific American Heritage Week through a 1978 joint congressional resolution. In 1992, the Asian Pacific American Heritage Week was expanded to a month-long celebration through H.R. 5572, authored by then California Congressman Norm Mineta. This month, we continue that proud tradition as we celebrate the contributions of Asian and Pacific Islander Americans to our nation, and particularly to California. Contrary to general belief, the Asian Pacific Islander community is not a new community in the United States. Our history in California and the United States dates back over 160 years ago. From Chinese American laborers who came in the 1800s to work the gold mines and help build the Transcontinental Railroad to the refugee resettlement programs that brought much of our Southeast Asian American community to California in the 1970s. Asian Pacific Islander history is incredibly diverse and vibrantly rich. While the API community includes many different communities, all of their stories are tied together by challenges they faced in the United States, whether it be xenophobic alien land laws that prevented South Asian American farmers from owning farms in the Central Valley in the early 1900s, and federal immigration laws in 1924 that barred immigrants from Asian countries to the United States. In spite of these struggles, API communities dedicated their lives to their families, our state, and our nation. They developed their own services in community-based organizations and ethnic communities like Chinatowns. They organized like the Filipino-American farm workers who fought for farm workers' rights as part of the United Farm Workers in the 1960s. The Japanese Americans, fought bravely for our country during World War II while their families were in internment camps back home. API Heritage Month serves as a time to honor this history and to acknowledge how APIs continue to contribute to all segments of our society. This month's commemoration of API Heritage Month serves as a reminder of the rich culture and diversity that makes our state great. As the many diverse Asian Pacific Islander communities throughout the state celebrate API Heritage Month this May, I hope you will join the API communities in your district to celebrate our proud history and heritage. Please join me in commemorating Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month by supporting ACR 157.
Mr. Swanson.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. I'm proud to rise in support of ACR 157. As chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus, we join and have proudly been in partnership with the Asian Pacific Islander Caucus, and we appreciate very much the work of all the honorees today. We also believe that one of the attractive qualities of California is our diverse community. In the city of Oakland that I represent, there are more than 125 different languages that are spoken, and that adds to the richness of diversity and culture in our district. And any substantive issue that has been facing our nation in the past, whether it was questions of war or peace, Asian Americans have played a substantial role. We also take a lot of pride in the contributions to science and engineering that has marked a very fine tradition. And so here I am today standing with my colleagues on the floor, wishing everyone to support and recognize and celebrate the contributions of Asian Americans to our state and to our nation. I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I feel compelled to add my voice in support of ACR 157, representing the 48th Assembly District, particularly where we have a vibrant and very productive Korean American community who has been very active in absolutely improving the quality of life for all of the citizens of California. So again, it is with great pride that I add my voice and say I am certainly very, very, very much in support of ACR 157. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Mr. Fong, would you like to close? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Romula.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As chair of the Independent Caucus, I wish to rise in support of the resolution, and I want to point out on a personal note that I grew up in the city of Delano, and I learned firsthand from my classmates what had transpired with the Filipino Americans. Many of the older Filipinos were not allowed to marry, were not allowed to bring wives to this country. And I currently represent Fresno, and I'm very proud to represent a large and vibrant Chinese American community as well as a Japanese American community. It's about time that we began to realize that we are one people, that all of us bring something to the table that helps to enrich our state and our country. And with that, it's my great pleasure to support this resolution and to urge an aye vote.
Mr. Ruskin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, am pleased to rise in support of the resolution. This Assembly makes a great example that ought to be followed throughout the state. It is an example of people from diverse cultures, diverse ethnic backgrounds, diverse religions working together in mutual respect. And it is an honor to rise in support of this resolution. The Asian Pacific American community makes a great contribution not only to our nation, but of course to our state, to the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, where I and many other legislators are from. And so it's my pleasure to add my voice to today's ceremony.
Ms. Yamada.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise in strong support of ACR 157. I did want to add this piece of information, however. As we celebrate all of the accomplishments and achievements of the Asian Pacific Islander community, our history is American history, but I think it's important to point out that we are not immune to any of the challenges of the 21st century. In many respects, we join many other communities in addressing health disparities, educational achievement disparities when you disaggregate the data. Sometimes the API community is looked upon as with certain stereotypes and certain positive ones, which we are very proud of. At the same time, I think that it is very important to point out that we share in the same troubles and travails as all communities in California, in our nation, and our world, and it is our obligation to work together to advance social justice for all people. And with that, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Fong, members, I'm sorry, in the gallery, applause is not allowed during debate on a bill. Thank you. Mr. Fong, you may close.
Okay, the Latino Legislative Caucus also supports the ACR 157, and I respectfully ask the first roll to be open for co-authors.
Thank you, Mr. Fong. The first roll call is for co-authors on ACR 157. The clerk will open the roll. This first roll is for co-authors, members, co-authors on this measure. Clerk will note there are 46 co-authors. We can take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Mr. Furutani, would you like to please come forward for our next section of our session?
Good morning, members. There we go. Ooh, this is nice up here. Members, thank you very much. Without objection, we will now move to the assembly observance of the Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Awards ceremony. Assembly Member Hayashi, the Vice Chair of the API Ledge Caucus, will provide us with an overview of API Heritage presentation. Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'm proud to open the Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month floor ceremony on behalf of the API Legislative Caucus. Each May on the floor of this House, we celebrate Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month by honoring leaders who have excelled in their respective fields, fulfilling the ideals and dreams of the earliest API immigrants. As stated by Assemblymember Fong, the API experience has been about struggles and challenges and about the determination and courage to overcome the greatest odds. Despite the challenges placed upon them, generations of APIs helped to build this nation. Because they labored, because they fought for liberty, because they stood for civil rights and against injustice, they have helped to make this country, especially our state, one of the best places to live in the world. Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month is truly a celebration of the human spirit. Today's honorees would make our API pioneers proud. They have utilized the opportunities made possible by earlier advocates and in turn have worked to create more and even better opportunities for future generations. Our 8 honorees hail from business, civil rights, community development, education, law, and public service. As diverse as their fields, they are outstanding examples of what it means to be an Asian American, and we thank them for their leadership and achievements. Members, please join me in welcoming to the floor the recipients of the 2010 Asian Pacific Heritage Month Awards.
Thank you very much, Member Hayashi. Members, I'm going to appoint a special committee of escorts to bring our special guests to the floor for the presentation. Will these members please retire to the back of the chamber at the appropriate time to escort their honoree? Mr. Tom Amiano, Mr. Jim Bell, Mr. Marty Block, Mr. Kevin De Leon, Mr. Mike Ng, Ms. Noreen Evans, Mr. Mike Fuhrer, Mr. Hagman, Mr. Jones, Dave Jones, Mr. Logue, Bonnie Lowenthal, Mr. Jim Nielsen, Ms. Nancy Skinner, Mr. Sandra Swanson, Mr. Manuel Norman Torres, Ms. Torres, and Mr. Manuel Perez. Members, I would also ask that Vice Chair of the caucus, Mr. Van Tran, Assembly Member Van Tran, would you please come to the front along with Vice Chair Nan Mary Hayashi and be the ones to receive the honorees as they come forward. The first honoree, members, I would like to call on Mr. Tirico to read the bio for Mr. Andrew Lai in his excellence in business. Mr. Tirico.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my great honor to present Andrew Lai with the API Heritage Award for Excellence in Business. Andrew immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in 1979 without any prior knowledge of the English language. He founded Super Bowl Bakery in 1984 with his 4 brothers, later becoming president and chief executive officer of Lay Brothers Corporation in 1993. Under Mr. Lay's leadership, Sugar Bowl Bakery has undergone phenomenal growth, now employing 250 people, making it one of the largest family-owned and operated bakeries in Northern California. His company was dubbed as one of the top 15 food and beverage manufacturers in the Bay Area by the San Francisco Business Times in 2008. In addition to his great business acumen, Mr. Lay serves as board member of the Asian Pacific Fund, a nonprofit corporation that improves the health of all Asian Americans in the Bay Area, and as an advisory board member for the National Minority Council and Asian Pacific Islander American Public Affairs Association. Members, please join me in welcoming our honoree, Andrew Lay.
Members, I would now like to call on Mr. Tran to read and introduce Mr. J.P. Park for his excellence in business.
Mr. Speakers, members, I have the honor of introducing our honoree for this year, Mr. Jungwon Patrick Park, who is the founder and CEO of Elite Education Institute, a test preparation and college counseling service company established in 1987. Elite currently has 33 offices in California, South Korea, Canada, Thailand, and Turkey. In addition, he is a regular columnist for the Korean Central Daily News, writing the featured column, College Majors and Rank in the Education section. Mr. Park is also a member of the American College Counseling Association and the National Association for College Admissions Counseling, and he has extensive experience providing academic and college counseling to both American and Korean students. In 2007, Mr. Park established the Center for Future Global Leaders, a nonprofit organization dedicated to cultivating the youth of today into the leaders of tomorrow through educational attainment and character development. Please join me in welcoming and honoring Mr. J.P. Park.
Members, I might make a notation that you notice some entry desks on the floor. There's been some difficulty with transportation from several areas this morning, so some of our members are stuck at airports. I would now like to call on Mr. Tarico again to introduce Mr. Anil Yadav for His Excellency's business as well. Mr. Tarico, if we could call on you one more time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is my great honor to present to all of you members Mr. Anil Yadav with the API Heritage Award for Excellence and Business. Mr. Yadav is a very good friend of mine. He's one of my constituents, and I refer to him as the king of Jack in the Box. He doesn't like to talk about this too much, but he is the largest franchisee of Jack in the Box in the nation. Owns 105 total restaurants, 129 Jack in the Box, and 26 Denny's throughout California and Texas. His company is headquartered in Fremont, California, my hometown, which provides complete in-house back office support for all his entities. Mr. Yadav was elected as president for the Jack in the Box Franchisee Association at the beginning of 2009. He is chairman of the board of trustees for the Federation of Indo-American Association, who represents all Indo-Americans of Northern California. He's an advisory board member for Multi-Unit Magazine and Conference, a board member of Brand Building Committee for Denny's, and Vice President of National Federation of Indian Association for the United States. It is with great pleasure and honor that I introduce to you members. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Yadav to our chambers.
Welcome, Mr. Yadav, and he's being escorted by Mr. Perez and Mr. Logue. I would now like to call on Ms. Ma to introduce Marilee Mondejar for her excellence in civil rights. She is escorted by Mr. Amiano and Ms. Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It's my pleasure to honor Marilee Mandahar with the API Heritage Award for Excellence in Civil Rights. Marilee Mandahar is a senior business leader with wide-ranging global experience as an entrepreneur, strategist, and advisor to leading organizations and executives. Immigrating to the United States in 1981, she actively participated in demonstrations and social justice movements for issues important to the Filipino and Filipino-American community. After raising 2 sons as a single mother, she returned to school to receive both a BA and MA in Organizational Development and Leadership. In 2009, Ms. Mandahar ended a notable 25-year business career to devote full-time as founding president of Filipina Women's Network, a nonprofit association that strives to build practical career and business skills. She successfully expanded the organization from its original 50 members in 2002 to over 4,800 members. Ms. Mandahar also serves on numerous nonprofit boards and commissions, including the San Francisco Commission on the Status of Women, the Filipino American Vets Exposition, and the American Society for Training and Development, among others. Let's welcome Marilee Mandahar.
Welcome, Mrs. Mandahar. Members, if Assemblyman Ted Lieu could introduce Sathya San for her excellence in community development. She is being escorted by our good friend Bonnie Lowenthal and Assemblywoman Norma Torres.
Mr. Speaker and members, it is my pleasure to honor Sathya San with the API Heritage Award for Excellence in Community Development. Sathya immigrated to Long Beach, California with her family in 1981 to escape the Khmer Rouge regime in her native Cambodia. During a year-long struggle of advocacy for a Cambodia town designation, Sathya solicited broad community support through creating a multicultural board representative of the community's diverse ethnicities. Located along Long Beach's Anaheim Street between Junipero and Atlantic Avenues, Cambodia Town received its designation from Long Beach City Council on July 2007. She also co-founded the Golden Coast Bank, the first Cambodian charter bank, and she continues to chair Cambodia Town Incorporated and serves in leadership positions in the community through her work as vice chair of the Cambodian Women and Family Association, chairperson for Khmer Women Association, vice chair of the Cambodian Business Association, and numerous other associations. Let's give a warm round of applause to Sathya San.
Welcome, Sathya San. Members, I'd now like to call on Assemblymember Fong to introduce Dr. Michael Chang for his excellence in education. Mr. Chang is being escorted by Jim Bell and Mr. Marty Block.
Mr. Chair and members, it's my pleasure to honor Dr. Michael Chang with the API Heritage Award for Excellence in Education. Dr. Michael Chang is a college professor, former mayor, and respected community builder. Dr. Chang has devoted his professional career and community involvement to civic education and building community in Cupertino and Silicon Valley. As the first Asian American mayor of Cupertino, he initiated an annual community congress on diversity and cultural understanding and supported the city, school districts, and De Anza College in forming a multicultural consortium. He founded De Anza College's Asian Pacific American Leadership Institute, which works with community leaders, civic philanthropists, and corporate business to foster civic education and building a public leadership pipeline for Asian American and underrepresented groups. Dr. Michael Chang is a senior fellow of the American Leadership Forum in Silicon Valley. His other honors include membership in the Committee of 100, De Anza College President's Award, selection as the top 10 Chinese American leaders in the Bay Area by a leading Chinese daily World Journal, as well as community impact and leadership awards from such organizations as Asian Americans for Community Involvement, Asian Law Alliance, Stanford Asian Pacific American Alumni Association, and other prestigious organizations. I'm honored to welcome Dr. Michael Chang.
Welcome, Dr. Chang. Members, I'd now like to call on Member Mike Ng to introduce Professor Jerry Kong for his excellence in law. Mr. Kong will be escorted by Kevin De Leon and Mr. Michael Fuhrer.
Mr. Speaker and members, it is my extreme pleasure to honor Professor Jerry Kong, who is a law professor where I went to law school, with the API Heritage Award for Excellence in Law. Jerry Kang is a distinguished professor of law at UCLA School of Law. He's also served as visiting professor of law at Harvard Law School and Georgetown Law Center. Professor Kang's scholarship focuses on race and communications, publishing texts such as Race, Rights, and Reparation, the Law and the Japanese American Internment, Communications Law and Policy, and numerous other articles on hate crimes, Japanese Americans, the lessons on the war on terror, privacy, persuasive computing, mass media policy, and cyber race, to name a few. Professor Kang is an expert on Asian American communities and is a member of the American Law Institute. He's also chaired the American Association of Law Schools section on defamation and privacy, and he has served on the board of directors of the Electronic Privacy Information Center. Professor Kang has garnered numerous accolades, including the World Technology Award for Law, the Vice President's Hammer Award for Reinventing Government, and the 2010 Ebby Award for the Art of Teaching, as the nation contemplates its next appointment to the United States Supreme Court. Let's welcome Professor Jerry Kang for his excellence in law.
Was that a nomination, Mr. Ng? Members, I'd like to now call on Assemblymember Mariko Yamada to introduce Catherine Offerman for excellence in public service. She is being escorted by our good friends, Dave Jones and Mr. Jim Nielsen.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker and members, it is a great honor for me to present and introduce to you Catherine Offerman, who many of us in the larger Sacramento region have known and come to love and respect for all of her advocacy and work on behalf of the API communities. She is being recognized today with the API Heritage Award for excellence in public service. Catherine Offerman's commitment to the local community is evident in her years of service and outreach activities. Since moving to Sacramento in 1996, she has strived to help advance the social, political, and economic well-being of the API community through her founding presidency of TOFA, which is Tuotupu Oe Oto Felenite, which means friendly islands at the end. So for those of you who are following the program booklet, you have now, if you listen to that correctly, you will have now learned some Tongan, all right? So there'll be a quiz later. Catherine has, in addition to serving over 10 years with TOFA, has professionally provided mental health assistance at the Asian Pacific Community Counseling Center and the Turning Point Community Program. She also serves as a leader in numerous API organizations, including the Council of Asian Pacific Islanders for Advocacy and Leadership, or CAPITAL, the Asian Pacific Islander American Public Affairs Association, APAPA, the Pacific Friendly Islands Incorporated, and many other community organizations. As a testament to Ms. Mann's work in the community, Governor Schwarzenegger appointed her to the Commission on Asian Pacific Islander Affairs in 2008. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Catherine Offerman as we recognize her for community service.
Talofa, Ms. Mann. Members, to reintroduce our awardees today, we have Mr. Andrew Lee, Mr. J.P. Park, Mr. Anil Yadav, Ms. Marilee Mandahar, Ms. Sathya San, Dr. Michael Chang, Professor Jerry Kang, and Ms. Catherine Offerman. Another round of applause, please. Members, we are going to be having a small reception in the Willie Brown Conference Room, but before we do, we would like to ask the Speaker, Mr. Speaker Perez, please come forward. The Minority Leader, Mr. Martin Garrick, and Speaker Emeritus, If Karen Bass is still on the floor, if they could come forward for a picture, please. If Mr. Garrett is not on the floor, someone else from the leadership of the... Oh, there he is. Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Thank you very much, members. This concludes our program.
And we're just going to keep going. Members, while the awardees are being escorted to the reception in the Willie Brown Conference Room, we would like to take up items on the daily file, the third reading. There are members who are not here yet because of flight delays, but we will just put items on call, and hopefully by the time they get here, they will be able to join us when we lift those calls. Okay, members, items on the third reading. File item 96 through 102, pass and retain. File item 103, pass temporarily. File item 104, pass and retain. File item 105, AB 2361. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2361 by Assemblymember Ruskin relative to weights and measures.
Mr. Ruskin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill extends the sunset on an important program which enables the agricultural commissioners and sealers to conduct inspections of weighing and measuring devices to ensure their accuracy. The accuracy of weighing and measuring devices like gas pumps and scales in supermarkets are important to protect consumers and also ensure a level playing field for honest businesses. With that in mind, I ask your support for extending the sunset on this program.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 49, no 0. Measure passes. File item 106 through 112, pass and retain. File item 113 on the amendments AB 2059. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2059 with amendments by Assemblymember Calderon.
Yes, Madam
Mr. Calderon.
Madam Speaker, members, AB 2059 is a bill that will help innocent third parties that are injured in automobile accidents by out-of-state renter of cars by allowing that victim to be able to serve the car company. But that's not what these amendments are about. These amendments specify and clarify that when a car rental company accepts service process for a car renter, it does not create any new relationship such as that of an agent and a principal. Ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, and without objection, we will take a voice vote on the amendments. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Out to print and back on file. File item 114 through 117, pass and retain. File item 118, AB 2202. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2202 by Assemblymember V. Manuel Perez, an act relating to New River.
Mr. Perez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Last fall, AB 1079 was signed into law. requiring the California-Mexico Border Relations Council to develop a strategic plan to guide the cleanup of the New River in my district. To support cleanup efforts, the 2010 water bond included a $20 million authorization for water quality and public health projects on the New River. However, the bond funding included no agency oversight and no minimum implementation guidance. Contingent on the passage of the water bond proposition this November, AB 2202 would specifically require that any appropriation from the New River bond funding must be consistent with the strategic plan for New River cleanup. AB 2202 attempts to provide necessary bond implementation language that will ensure greater accountability to taxpayers for public bond dollars. We have received unanimous bipartisan support for this measure, and I ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Seeing no questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 50, no 0. Measure passes. File item 119, pass and retain. File item 120, AB 2137. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2137 by Assemblymember Chesbro, an act relating to fertilizer.
Mr. Chesbro.
Madam Speaker, I'd prefer to say that this bill relates to compost rather than fertilizer, but take your pick. AB 2137 would allow composters to continue the long-standing practice of providing certified lab analyses showing the nutrient contents of their product to their customers pending the completion of CDFA's evaluation of the proper regulatory standards for this material. Compost is a vital agricultural input that helps build healthy soils and increase crop yields, and the production of compost has been identified as a key part of California's achievement of the 57% waste reduction goal, as well as our greenhouse gas goals. Composters regularly send samples of their products to third-party labs for an independent analysis of the nutrient content and other parameters in their compost, and the resulting analyses provide crucial information to their agricultural customers. CDFA has said that providing this laboratory analysis to a customer is equivalent to making a labeling claim, and the compost product would have to maintain consistent nutrient levels to comply with the labeling requirements. While this standard is appropriate for traditional fertilizer, it can't be meaningfully applied to the product of an inherently variable biological process such as composting due to the variance of weather, the input on any particular day of feedstocks, and the level of ongoing biological process that's continuing. Specifically, this bill will clarify that providing a certified lab analysis that shows the historical nutrient content does not constitute making a label claim for the material, sets new constraints for compost lab analysis, including requirements that the material be tested to be a representative sample of the materials being sold, and the bill is set to sunset on January 1st, 2014, coinciding with the completion of CDFA's rulemaking of proper regulatory standards for compost. I've been diligently working with the agricultural community. The opposition of those groups has been removed. I continue to work with CDFA to reach an acceptable compromise as the bill moves forward. I urge your aye vote.
Mr. Berryhill.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, question the author.
Without objection.
Yes, Mr. Chesbro, this went through our Ag Committee, and I know that you've been working really hard on this bill. You mentioned that the Department of Agriculture is still opposed to this for the same reasons that they mentioned in the Ag Committee.
Mr. Chesbro.
Yes, Madam President, Madam Speaker, still doing it. Madam Speaker and members, I'm working very closely with the Department of Food and Agriculture. I know who signs our bills or not. It is my goal to have CDFA on our side. I think we've made a lot of progress. We're not there yet, but I do ask you to be supportive in moving the bill forward so that we can actually help composters continue to do business the way they have while this regulatory process goes forward.
Yeah, on my own time. This is a very interesting industry. It's a cottage industry, and it's a growing industry. I think that they fall into a really kind of a small category of many different cottage industries that would love to have exemptions from some of these regulations. And for me, I wasn't able to get on this bill in the Ag Committee, And today, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to support this bill. He has worked very hard to move this thing forward, and I really do appreciate that, and I do take you at your word that you will continue to work with the Department of Ag. I hope by the time it gets back over here, Mr. Chesbro, that you'll have them on board and I'll be able to fully support this bill. I'm not going to be able to do it today. Thank you.
Ms. Caballero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Last year I carried AB 856, which requires the Secretary of Food and Agriculture in consultation with the Advisory Board to review the issues related to organic inputs. And they are to come up with a plan by January 1st, 2012. The Advisory Board has recently met. They've identified the stakeholders. And although my bill sets up the framework for which they can make the determination as to what kind of regulations the composting industry must follow, I recognize that this is going to take several years. In the meantime, I think we would all agree that what we want is to encourage this industry to continue to take our waste product and do something good with it and actually use that waste product in a commercially viable manner, which is in agriculture. And so I support this bill. It will address the interim period that we're going through. It will allow the organics industry, the composting industry, to continue to produce material. I thank Mr. Chesbro for the number of amendments he's taken along the way to try to do everything possible to meet the needs not only of agriculture but of the composting industry as well. And I understand that amendments are going to be forthcoming that will indicate that it doesn't impact the process, the lengthy process that we set up on AB 856. And so I thank the author for that, and I urge your aye vote on this bill.
Ms. Conway.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill. The Senator, Assembly Member, what shall I call you?
Whatever.
Mr. Chesbro has worked very hard on this, and I was in support of it. I take him as a man of his word, and he'll keep working through whatever issues remain. Coming from a Board of Supervisors, understand this industry and the issues that it has, even with county regulations and all that goes into it. So I just wanted to let the members know that also a member of the Ag Committee, I do support it, and I urge an aye vote.
Mr. Chesbro, would you like to close?
Members, I am simply trying to allow the compost industry to continue to build its partnership with agriculture while the regulatory program that was launched by Ms. Caballero's bill is allowed to go forward. Just want to remind you all that the highest value premium agricultural product in our state are fine wines that are produced from Lodi to Napa to Sonoma are generally grown in compost. And composters depend on the public's confidence and agricultural's trust in order for compost to be a viable part of agriculture in this state. And I think that we can do that, but we need this bill to help them in the interim. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Chesbro. Oh, clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 41, noes 13. Measure passes. File item 121 through 124 pass and retain. File item 125, AB 2037. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2037 by Assembly Member V. Manuel Perez, an act relating to electricity.
Mr. Perez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Air pollution does not recognize international borders. Air emissions produced by power generation plants on the other side of the California border create negative impacts on the air quality in the adjacent air basins, airsheds, affecting public health and the quality of life for the residents of the region. The Imperial Valley has one of the worst particulate matter pollution problems in California, as well as historically high rates of asthma hospitalizations among children. This issue is compounded by a recent trend of power plants being sited in Mexico, adjacent to the state and federal borders. AB 2037 is intended to address adverse air pollution impacts by only authorizing the approval of energy contracts to out-of-state power plants that meet California emissions and offset standards. This bill would prohibit a load-serving entity or local publicly owned electric utility from entering into a long-term financial commitment with or for a new electrical generation facility that does not meet California standards. This bill has been narrowly drafted and addresses a very specific environmental concern and applies only to prospective additions after 2011. In closing, members, I ask for your support.
Mr. Logue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in opposition to this measure because it will limit the available power source to meet California's energy demands while increasing the price of electricity. We need to get serious about doing everything possible we can to help Californians survive this economic crisis. This is the type of legislation that's going to hold us back, that's going to cause the energy rates to skyrocket and more businesses to leave the state of California. There's no reason why we should move forward on this bill, and I urge your no vote. Thank you.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Members, I also rise in opposition. I understand the intention behind the measure, and I think that the ultimate end result of what is trying to be achieved here can be achieved through an alternative method that I think is far less onerous, and that is making sure that California's laws are not going to be in contradiction with our energy goals. And that's what we have right now. We have contradictory policy goals, and those policy objectives, while both laudable, are not in concert with each other. Members, if we're going to fundamentally alter the way in which we look at global warming or other issues concerning our air pollution concerns, we need to make sure that they're consistent not only with our business environment, but with our actual practical needs and considerations. The fact is, we are always going to have outside sources of energy. We can never be wholly dependent. It's just not, it's a function of wattage, it's a function of usage, it's a function of our ability to produce and generate in the state of California. To that end, members, while I understand again the goal, I think there's a much more reasonable way to reach that goal, and I would urge your no vote on this bill.
Mr. Knight.
I too rise in opposition to this bill. We are constantly trying to find more power to this state. We're trying to produce new standards to this state. The RPS is going to put a heavy burden on this, on the way we look at power, and now we're going to try and make a different regulatory status between state and country. This is not the way to go. This is going to increase prices, and I think you should oppose this bill.
Mr. Perez, would you like to close?
Yes, Madam Speaker. First of all, this bill is about being clean and green, and I think it's very important that we support that. And as well, Sempra already has updated one of their plants, and they're using back type of technologies to make sure that the air emissions that are produced are towards California standards. At the end of the day, if this was happening in your districts, ladies and gentlemen, members, you would be fighting for the same thing. And ultimately, this is about also quality of life. This is not about raising fees or anything of that sort. This is about making sure that we also have a quality of life for our residents in Imperial County, regardless of these American-owned plants on the other side of the border. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 41, noes 22. Measure passes. File item 126, pass and retain. File item 127, AB 2328. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2328 by Assemblymember Nilo, an act relating to air pollution.
Mr. Nilo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, the Air Resources Board has 11 members. Those 11 members represent a comprehensive population from health and science fields, but there is no specific requirement that the regulated community be represented on that board. That regulated community, by and large, is the business community, and since the vast majority of business entities in this state and the vast majority of employment in this state are small businesses, AB 2328 would address this omission very simply by just requiring that one seat on the Air Resources Board be reserved for a small business person. Now, there are a couple of members on the Air Resources Board now and from time to time that are business people, but that's not specifically why they are there. This bill, again, would just guarantee representation of the regulated community on the Air Resources Board, and I ask for an aye vote on AB 2328.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 49, noes 7. Measure passes. File item 128, AB 2419. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2419 by Assemblymember Cook, an act relating to contractors.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill makes minor technical changes to the Contractor State Licensing Board law. It's actually brought to me by the sponsor, which is the Contractor State Licensing Board. It'll make some changes regarding the name of the board, rename specific classifications of contractors, and other conforming changes related to certain provisions that are now in place. This bill has had bipartisan support, and I ask for your aye vote, please.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 55, noes 0. Measure passes. File items 129 and 130 pass and retain. File item 131, AB 2309. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2309 by Assemblymember Fletcher, an act relating to veterans.
Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, AB 2309 seeks to honor an American hero. When I left active duty, I wanted to get more involved in the veterans community, and one of the first people I met was John Smith. John Smith was a Vietnam veteran, wounded in combat, who upon returning to America dedicated the rest of his life in service to veterans of all generations. In 1981, he was one of the original founders of the Veterans Village of San Diego, committed to caring for our homeless. He started the Stand Down, which has become a model for taking care of homeless veterans across the nation. He's chaired every organization and parade and entity and been given every award and honor that any veteran could ever be given. Earlier this year, John passed, and Assembly Bill 2309 is a joint effort with other members from San Diego who knew John well to rename the Chula Vista Veterans Home the John Smith Memorial Veterans Home. He was also one of the first employees there. It's a fitting tribute and honor to a great Californian, a great American, and someone we should all strive to emulate, and I'd ask for your aye vote.
Ms. Salas.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I knew John Smith very, very well, and I think that his passion for serving all veterans was a result of his own service as a medic during the Vietnam War, where he was, in many cases, the last person that a wounded soldier would talk to before they either were evacuated to a hospital or passed in his arms. He himself was wounded in combat, and when he came home from Vietnam, it took him many, many years to recover for his wounds. And he earned a degree in psychology. And he used his training and his experience during the war to reach out to those veterans that had become homeless. And I met him many, many, many years ago when we in the city of Chula Vista were looking to bring the Veterans Home to our city. So there's no way that you can separate the Chula Vista Veterans Home from the memory of John Smith. And I think it's fitting that the home be renamed for John Smith, so that we'll always remember him and the brave work that he did for each and every veteran. And he lived the motto that no soldier should be left behind. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 61, no 0. Measure passes. File item 132 has been dispensed with. File item 133 on the amendments, AB 2324. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2324 by Assemblymember John A. Perez.
Ms. Lowenthal.
Speaker and members, on behalf of Speaker Perez, I rise to present on amendments to AB 2324. This amendment simply corrects a drafting error in this bill. I respectfully request your aye vote on this amendment, and I ask that the bill go out to print and back on file.
Seeing no further questions or debate, without objection, we will take a voice vote on the amendments. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted, out to print and back on file. File items 134 through 140 pass and retain. File item 141, AB 1997. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1997 by Assemblymember Portantino, an act relating to student financial aid.
Mr. Portantino.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Currently, community college students can apply for a BOG fee waiver by submitting either a Board of Governors short form or completing the FAFSA. This bill would quite simply make the FAFSA the primary application form for the BOG fee waiver, while allowing financial aid officials at community colleges to direct students to use the short form on a case-by-case basis when it is in the student's best interest. According to the Institute for College Access and Success, our community college students leave approximately $500 million in federal financial aid on the table, money that can be used to help them spend more time pursuing their education and less time working or reducing their student loans. Research shows that more students work, the less time they are to complete their studies. By submitting the FAFSA, students can receive not only the BOG fee waiver, but they can access Pell Grants, Cal Grants, federal student loans, and work-study awards and scholarships. I respectfully ask for an aye vote to simplify the process and put more money into our most needy students' pockets.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 65, no 0. Measure passes. File items 142 through 144 pass and retain. File item 145, AB 1921. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1921 by Assemblymember Davis, an act relating to the Political Reform Act of 1974.
Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill, AB 1921, in fact adds on to a prior bill, AB 2607 of last year, that required certain selected counties to have an opportunity to file the forms, the annual Form 700 statements of economic interest on an annual basis electronically. AB 1921 before us today simply adds and permits 3 additional counties to join in what has already been described in committee as a cost-saving measure and also an environmentally prudent one, inasmuch as we limit the amount of paper rolling around our offices. To that end, this bill will permit Santa Clara and Ventura counties, as well as the city of Long Beach. I respectfully ask for your aye vote, and Madam Speaker, if I could, for those who'd like to co-author on the first ballot, I'd like to ask for that.
This is a bill, Mr. Davis, so we cannot take co-authors at this moment.
Okay. All right.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 61, no 0. Measure passes. File item 146, pass and retain. File item 147, AB 2467. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2467 by Assemblymember Monning, an act relating to elections.
Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. AB 2467 would make the process of filling out a vote-by-mail ballot application easier and more straightforward for voters by eliminating the existing requirement that a voter know and fill in specific dates when submitting a vote-by-mail ballot application. The law currently requires the Secretary of State to prepare a uniform electronic vote-by-mail ballot application and distribute it to election officials. On this application, the voter is required to write the correct date by which the application must be received by the election officials. AB 2467 would eliminate the requirement that the voter know this exact date and would therefore simplify the process of applying for a vote-by-mail ballot. This has received bipartisan support. There's no opposition on file. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 64, no 0. File item 148, AB 1902. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1902 by Assemblymember Portantino, an act relating to county employees' retirement.
Mr. Portantino.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I'm presenting AB 1902, a measure that I introduced on behalf of the Los Angeles County Employee Retirement Association. This bill seeks to ensure plan members are treated equitably under plan provisions for the recording of payroll data, disability, eligibility, and benefit portability. There is no opposition. This measure passed the Assembly PERS Committee with unanimous bipartisan support, and I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Aye 64, no 0. Measure passes. File item 149, AB 2149. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2149 by Assemblymember Furutani, an act relating to county retirement.
Mr. Furutani.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Since 1937, the County Employees Retirement Law has reflected the firefighting profession as an exclusively male-centered career. AB 2149 makes substantive changes that delete obsolete references to firemen in the county retirement law and replaces them with the general neutral term firefighter. This is part of a broader effort to focus on recruitment and retention of women in the non-traditional public safety professions and to reinforce genuine gender equity. I urge an aye vote. Thank you very much.
Mr. Anderson.
Question of the author.
Without objection.
Do you plan to amend this bill down the way? As I read the bill, I was trying to decide whether this was a spot bill or whether this was an actual bill. And I'm reluctant to vote for it for fear of what it's going to turn into.
Mr. Anderson, that question has come up before. This is not a spot bill. This is in the content that I've said in the statement relative to changing to a more general neutral approach to the term fireman to firefighter.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 59, no 0. Measure passes. File item 150, pass and retain. File item 151, AB 1726. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1726 by Assemblymember Swanson, an act relating to common interest developments.
Mr. Swanson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to present AB 1726 that has received bipartisan support so far, which is a good government bill that will cure the existing dilemma in elections for board of directors on homeowner associations. Current law requires a quorum of 50% plus one of all homeowner association members to vote on board of director elections. It has been historically difficult for homeowner associations to reach this threshold, so oftentimes current board members end up appointing persons to the board to fill the vacancies instead of the election by the homeowners. This bill will reduce the quorum needed for the purposes of conducting annual elections only from a majority to a third of the homeowners that show up at the subsequent elections. AB 1726 reduces quorums, would kick in on subsequent elections only. The bill also makes technical clarifying amendments which will make the law easier to implement and reduce the confusion. The bill is sponsored by the Community Association Institute, the Executive Council of Homeowners, and I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 54, noes 1. Measure passes. Members, we have 2 more bills and then the consent calendar, so any member wishing to vote on the consent calendar that is not down here on the floor, please come to the floor. File item 152, pass and retain. File item 153, AJR 39. Clerk will read.
Assembly Joint Resolution 39 by Assemblymember Torlakson relative to common state education standards.
Mr. Torlakson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this has to do with the national standards in curriculum, the Common Core standards. The Association of National Governors and the Council of Chief Education Officers of the United States have come up with standards in mathematics and English language arts. This resolution says go beyond that. Let's look at science. Let's look at social science. Let's look at our history. Let's look at our democracy so that we have a more well-rounded education and targets for learning. I urge your support for this resolution, which calls for a broader set of standards beyond the mathematics and language arts that have already been promulgated. I would first like to open for co-authors.
Mr. Torlakson is asking for the first roll to be open for co-authors. Members, the clerk will open the roll. This is for co-author members. Clerk will note there are 53 co-authors. This is an AJR, so it does require a roll call vote. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 60, no 0. Measure passes. File item 154, ACR 157. Clerk will read. Oh, I'm sorry, we already dispensed with that item. Members, we are now on the consent calendar. We are at the second day consent calendar. Does any member wish to remove an item from the second day consent calendar? Seeing and hearing none, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2365 by Assemblymember Liu, an act relating to veterans.
Clerk will open the roll on the consent calendar. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll. Ayes 67, no 0 on the consent calendar.
Assembly Bill 2417.
Ayes 67, no 0.
Assembly Bill 2619.
Ayes 67, no 0.
Assembly Bill 2798.
Ayes 67, no 0.
Assembly Bill 2275.
Ayes 67, no 0.
Assembly Bill 2769.
Ayes 67, no 0.
Assembly Joint Resolution 40.
Ayes 67, no 0.
And Assembly Concurrent Resolution 125.
Ayes 67, no 0. This concludes the business on the daily file in the regular session. All other items will be passed and retained. All motions shall be continued. The session schedule is as follows. Tuesday, May 11th, check-in. Wednesday, May 12th, check-in. Thursday, May 13th, floor session at 9 a.m. Friday, May 14th, no floor session, no check-in. Mr. Jones, for what purpose do you rise?
Madam Chair, just to announce that the Budget Subcommittee on Health and Human Services will meet upon adjournment in room 447. That's a room change, members. Upon adjournment, room 447.
Clerk will note, Mr. Calderon moves and Mr. Hagman seconds that this House stands adjourned until Thursday, May 13th at 9 a.m. The quorum call is lifted.
Jones, vote change, file item 127, AB 2328, aye to no.
Jones, Assembly Bill 2328, aye to no.
File item 127, Ruskin, no to aye.
Ruskin, Assembly Bill 2328, no to aye.